And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of New York State Sports here on IE Sports Radio, direct feed for all that is sports. Ricky K here with you, episode 73. We got a great show for you. We got a first-time guest on the show this week is Jake Asman from the Jake Asman Show. You can catch him also on ESPN Radio in New York and on Sirius Mad Dog Radio. We're going to talk Jets head coach search, Jets GM search still ongoing. We're going to handicap the candidates in that. Giants get some bad news that comes to maybe getting a quarterback with the third pick in the draft, and we'll talk about maybe the defensive coordinator maybe moving on somewhere else. We'll talk about the Knicks. They're good, but this weekend maybe showed they're not really good. The Rangers bounce back. The Islanders make some history this week out west. I also had a chance to cover the New York Sirens this week, so we'll talk about my experience there yesterday, a dramatic overtime win over Toronto. We'll talk St. John's with another great win in the Big East over Villanova. We'll talk NYCFC signing one of their own. And the latest on the Yankees and the Mets is we're literally just a month from pitchers and catchers reporting. It's all coming up next here on New York State Sports. We will see you in just a minute. Of course, welcome back to New York State Sports, IE Sports Radio, direct feed for all of the sports. We're really only 1 week away from the 1 year anniversary of this show, which is really awesome. So that should be fun next week. Tara Rodriguez, SoCal Supreme Sports Show, Set Point is here today. Ralph Calise from the Yinzer Report is here today. We'll get into the Steelers head coach and what that might mean maybe for the Jets in a little bit. But I remind you, of course, you can follow us on X, IG, Facebook, TikTok, all that fun stuff at IE Sports Radio. Go to iesportsradio.com. We have show pages for each show, so /New York State Sports to see on the screen. If you missed any portion of the show, or just want to catch me again, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all that fun stuff. Be sure to check that out. You can also follow me on X at Rickenator555, or you can follow the show on X at NY State Sports IE. So we'll take a little bit of a break. We will talk about some of our sponsors, and we will talk about all things football coming up next with the Jets and the latest in their head coach and GM search, as well as the Giants, with some interesting stuff popping up about them over the course of this week. You're listening to New York State Sports and IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all of the sports. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
IE Sports Radio fans, this show is brought to you by Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky. Planet Jerky is the official jerky of the 2022 California League champion Lake Elsinore Storm, Single A affiliate of the San Diego Padres. This all brisket jerky has gluten-free options, contains no MSG, no sodium nitrate, is low in sugar, and high in protein. Go to their website at planetjerky.net and follow them on Instagram at Planet Jerky. Planet Jerky, the jerky that's on a whole other planet.
Rise and shine. It's 4 a.m. The stars are still out. The sun is beneath the horizon, but it's time to punch in and go to work. The comfort of your warm-ups turns into the grinding out of your reps as the clinking and the clanking of the plates create a symphony of euphoria. There's no other feeling like it. Earn it, burn it, and take what's yours. IE Sports Radio has proudly partnered with Vital Apparel, a brand that not only fits great, but also promotes and donates to mental health research. Use our code IESR to get 15% off their comfortable and inspiring gym wear and help them on their amazing journey to support mental health. Go hard, take part in your iron therapy, and be strong. Because when your mental health is as strong as you are, there's no telling how far you'll go.
And of course, special thanks to the folks over at Planet Jerky. Of course, get some great premium brisket beef jerky for the postseason. So you watch some of these really good, well, we had one good football game this week, at least, out of the 5 that have been played so far. But you want to check that out. Of course, January and any time of the year, great to support mental health research. So check out Vital Apparel, which is great. And we have a new sponsor on the show, Get Raw Nutrition. So be sure to use the promo code IESR for 10% off any nutritional supplements. So network keeps growing with some awesome companies supporting all the great podcasts that we do. So we thank them for that. So the first block of the show is mainly a lot about the Jets head coach and the GM search still ongoing. Only one head coach vacancy has been filled so far in the NFL, and that was the Patriots hiring Mike Rabel, which is no surprise. And there was a report out that the Jets tried really hard to get Mike Rabel, basically to the point that I think it was Zach Rosenblatt was talking about it yesterday. And Diana Rossini has also mentioned a lot. The Jets did try, and Mike Rabel said, no, I'm just going to the Patriots. And that was even Rabel told Tom Brady no. So out in Vegas. So there's no really surprise that Mike Rabel decided to go to New England with something we talked about last week that was essentially a foregone conclusion. So that's why that only vacancy has been filled. The Bears still open, Saints, Jaguars, Raiders, and the Jets. So the question now being, and of course we talked about this process, it's going to be going to take time. Of course, with all you can only do virtual interviews and with certain coaches that are still around, and in-person interviews only if the coaches are out or GMs are out. The Jets had a busy week, and a really busy week, and it's good for them that they are taking their time with this process, because the search firm, led by, of course, Mike Tannenbaum and Rick Spielman, and the 33rd team, they're trying to find Woody Johnson, the right candidates for this job. And the question really is there a perfect candidate for this job? It probably was Rabel, from the standpoint that Mike Rabel's a culture changer. Mike Rabel's a guy that can come in and fix your program immediately and kind of change it. So now the Jets have to realize, okay, what exactly are they looking for? And I even saw they interviewed Mike Locksley this week, the head coach at Maryland, which was kind of a surprise, just because that was a name that was thrown out of nowhere. Darren Rizzi from the Saints. They were interviewing like 5 GM candidates on Saturday. So they were very busy. And I think the question is going to be, who is the favorite for the head coach position? I think the GM position will get filled first, because I'm still in the believer that the GM does have some importance in the NFL. And something I talked about with Jake, when you hear that interview that we recorded late last week after our next commercial, is going to be, I think the GM and coach bond is so important, because I think if you have the right duo that clicks, that's what makes a franchise special. I mean, look at the Commanders, for example. Adam Peters comes in, picks Dan Quinn. They have the same vision. You get a rookie quarterback in Jaden Daniels, and boom, you're clicking bigger than expected. You're a divisional round in year one. You want to have that connection, because if you then get rid of the GM but keep the coach, or you get rid of the coach but you keep the GM, and visions get blurred, because at the same time, we're human. So you want, ideally, to pick the GM before you pick the coach. Now, the question is going to be, does the GM want the coach that you want? For example, if you bring in Mike Berganzi, who's the guy, assistant GM with the Chiefs, Are you looking to then bring in Matt Nagy, which I would not want to do, or Steve Spagnuolo, who came up, which I think Spags is an interesting candidate. Problem is he's not been good as a head coach, but I think his reputation as an elite defensive coordinator from his time with the Giants, now his time with the Chiefs, has gone a long way for him. But something like that, do you want that combination? Like if you bring in Mike Greenberg, assistant GM of the Bucks, are you now going to interview Liam Cohen, which the Jets have not done, or we haven't even heard if Cohen has confirmed or denied that request? The only denied request we've heard is Aaron Glenn denying to interview with the Patriots. So that's a possibility. Liam Cohen is a good offensive mind. Now the Bucks are out. Maybe the Jets give him a call, see if they want to talk to him. You have the assistant GM of the Eagles, Alec Halaby, which we talked about last week, that a lot of people seem to like. But the question we have at the bottom here is who should be the favorite for the head coach position? And the two names you hear a lot about are Brian Flores and Aaron Glenn. Brian Flores, of course, was a head coach of the Dolphins. Did not go very well, particularly the rocky relationship with Tua. But Brian Flores has been in this division before, and I believe the question for the Jets is going to be, is not having experience a bad thing? Brian Flores having experiences, I think, what the Jets are ultimately looking for. A guy who has learned something first time around that's going to bring something a second time. Flores has coached in this division. He coaches really strong defenses. When the Patriots won their last Super Bowl, even though Belichick was the coach, Brian Flores, I thought, played a big factor in winning that Super Bowl with its defensive game plans, especially against Sean McVay's offense. That goes a long way, and you'll see Flores' defense on display tonight against the Rams on Monday Night Football in Arizona. And, of course, our thoughts and prayers out to all those affected by the wildfires in California. Hopefully everybody is staying safe there. But you'll see that defense on full display, and I think he's the guy, if you give him an experienced quarterback, he can do something. Aaron Glenn, the same thing. You watch Aaron Glenn's defense last week against the Vikings with the banged-up units that the Lions have. That's a masterclass on how to scheme and how to coach, and that's why you want Aaron Glenn. And while Aaron Glenn doesn't have the experience of being a head coach, he has the experience of playing in New York with the Jets and learning from a guy like Bill Parcells and learning how to be in the New York culture. And I think that's very important because that goes under the radar when you talk about, well, the Jets and this, how do you handle New York? I didn't think that gets talked about enough in any New York coaching cycle. You have to be able to handle the media. It's one of the most important things going with the Jets. So to me, is not having experience a bad thing? In Glenn's case, I don't think it is, because Glenn has different types of experiences that work. I don't want Matt Nagy from the Jets. I don't want Arthur Smith, especially after watching the Steelers offense crumble down the stretch. That does not help Arthur Smith, I think, in any head coaching interviews and anything like that. There's other names. I think I would love if the Jets gave Marcus Freeman a call. I don't think that'll ever happen. But a lot of the talk this week, and you heard over the weekend, a lot of the beat writers were mentioning the combination of Ryan Grigson, who is in the Vikings front office, along with Brian Flores. Now, Ryan Grigson's an interesting candidate because when you look at Ryan Grigson from his time with the Colts, a lot of people are very critical of his time in Indianapolis. Now, at the same time, this guy who did draft Andrew Luck, easier said than done, of course. But Grigson did have a Colts team that went to an AFC championship game, which I think is something that shouldn't be left out. He's been in the front office for 25. He's been a front office executive for 25 years. They won 2 AFC South titles. And you look at that draft, and now they got Andrew Luck. They got T.Y. Hilton in that draft in 2012. Now, he's had some bad drafts. I mean, I think people will point to the Trent Richardson pick and say, well, that's something you probably aren't happy with. But he has a track record of winning. And if I could have Big Mike from our indie show on and talk about the job Chris Ballard's done, I think people in Indianapolis more appreciate Ryan Grigson now than they did back then. That the Colts, while they didn't really reach their potential with Luck and didn't win a Super Bowl, they at least were competitive and were able to really turn around that roster. Again, you look at a Colt team that was 2-14 without Luck and then went 11-5. So there is a turnaround process that you do like with this. Are his drafts perfect? As we mentioned, no. Hasn't had a good draft. Doesn't have a track record of great drafts. But I think that could work. Is anything going to be the home run hire? And I think that's the big question here. Is there a home run hire left? No. Well, what's interesting is Connor Hughes even said the other day, Rex Ryan's out, which I think is a good thing. Connor Hughes from SNY. Rex Ryan is out. As I said last week, I don't think he fits, and we'll talk about that with Jake in a little bit, why that doesn't fit. But the one name that's not out there that I think would be really interesting, hopefully the Jets are calling or trying to do anything they can as we speak. And the last guy I think that could be the culture changer in the room, and you see on the screen, is Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin, I think, has run its course in Pittsburgh. I don't think it's a bad thing. It doesn't mean that Mike Tomlin's done a bad job. I just think when you look at the Steelers and you look at the way that they've kind of flamed out in postseasons and they've had like all their playoff losses, they've been down by 3+ touchdowns. But what does Mike Tomlin bring? And there was a report from Adam Schefter Sunday that a team did call, but Mike Tomlin has a no-trade clause. Very intriguing that a coach has a no-trade clause in this process, but that's what Mike Tomlin has. You want a culture changer? You want a guy that's going to come in and shake tail feathers around and ruffle guys around and maybe change the vibe in the room? That's Mike Tomlin. You want a guy that knows how to handle the media, that some thinks are going to be a broadcaster down the line and really do a good job in TV? Mike Tomlin. You want a coach that always gets the maximizes the most out of the least in terms of having less talent but getting the most results? Mike Tomlin. Think about the Steelers the last couple of years, a team that wasn't picked to finish high in the AFC North, yet they always found the way to get to the postseason. Mike Tomlin would bring consistency. Mike Tomlin would bring a culture change. And what do the Jets need? The Jets are not going to go from also ran 7th pick in the draft to elite overnight. They need a guy that's going to come in and really change what the team is looking for. And to me, that's Mike Tomlin. Because I want a guy that gets you to postseasons. The Jets haven't been in the postseason in over a decade. That should be step one now. If it takes draft picks, it takes draft picks. But you have to at least exhaust that option while it's out there. And I don't know what Ralph thinks because Ralph's here. I want to what that would happen because I know there's a lot of Steeler fans that are just done with Mike Tomlin and want to change. I don't think the Rooney family will get rid of him. I think it's really tough for the Steelers to really. They've only had 3 coaches in the last 30 years. Nothing is really going to change with that. But if it's not Tomlin, to me, it's either Flores or Glenn. I would sign up for Aaron Glenn, personally. I think, yes, it's a defensive coach. And that's another thing. You never want to say, well, the Jets have had so many defensive coaches that they got to get an offensive coach. Not the case. Ben Johnson would have fit. Ben Johnson doesn't want to interview. That's fine. But you want the best coach. And you can always get a good offensive mind to put with Aaron Glenn or Brian Flores or whoever it is. But you want the guy that's going to be the leader in the room. And I think Flores is that. And I think Aaron Glenn is that. And that really fits those two things. So we'll talk more about the Jets again coming up in a minute. My conversation with Jake. But let's talk a little bit of Giants. They've been in the news lately. Now, there was an interesting report from Jordan Raanan on ESPN.com. You want to check it out about the Giants' tumultuous season. And there was a really interesting scenario about the cornerback, Nick McLeod, where essentially talking about about paying rent in October and things like that. And just show, again, go read the article on ESPN.com. But these are things that happen on bad football teams. It doesn't paint a good light on Joe Shane or Brian Dable. I've said it. I think Brian Dable's not going to call plays next year. The Giants front office staff is going to look a lot different. At least hopefully from a coaching perspective. Now, there were reports from Dan Duggan, who covers the Giants, The Athletic, and Mike Garafolo from NFL Network that it sounds like the Giants' defensive coordinator, Shane Bowen, is going to be talking to the Patriots. Shane Bowen worked with Mike Rabel in Tennessee. I think that's a move that could work. And it sounds like with John Mara's comments last week that he was very disappointed with the defense. that Shane Bowen would be the guy that's kind of the scapegoat here in this process. So to me, that probably signals a change. Mike Kafka's interview for head coaching jobs, I don't think he's going to get one, but it's probably clear that Mike Kafka is probably not going to be the guy calling plays. Maybe Dable looks for somebody different to call plays for whoever the quarterback is. But the Giants are also going to lose a key piece in their front office. Charles Robinson, who covers the NFL for Yahoo, yesterday reported the Giants are going to lose executive advisor Ryan Cowden to the Patriots. Now, why is that a big deal? Cowden was with Rabel from 2016 to 22, and he was Joe Shane's advisor since 2023. And if you want to give Ryan Cowden a lot of credit, he was the guy that maybe helped get Neighbors, helped get Tracy, helped find those diamonds in the rough the Giants had last year. Because you look at Joe Shane's drafts before last year, they weren't very good. So that's a key blow if Ryan Cowden is in the mix. And Mike Rabel was asked about that actually at his Patriot press conference today. He basically said nothing's been finalized. So talking about maybe would he work with Elliott Wolf. But at the same time, Ryan Cowden should be in the Patriots front office in some capacity, which that was according to Mark Daniels, who also is a really good Patriots beat writer for Mass Live. So you're talking about the Giants getting a shakeup somewhat in the front office. You're talking about a Giant coaching staff, again, looking for something to pin the blame on. And as I said last week, John Mara's like the parent that didn't want to punish their kids, but kept threatening to punish their kids. And then the other big blow to the Giants was what happened down with the Browns. Deshaun Watson ruptures his Achilles a second time. Is probably going to miss the bulk of this coming next season. Now, why does that bother the Giants? Well, Cleveland Browns are picking second. Cleveland Browns need a quarterback. And they're more likely now with Watson's future up in the air. It's one thing to restructure the contract, but now you don't have him for another whole year, and you eventually have to find your future. Browns are taking a quarterback, whether it's Ward or whether it's Sanders. And I don't think that really matters if Dion says no, he doesn't go to Cleveland. You make that pick because it best benefits your franchise to get one. So if Tennessee's picking at 1 and gets a QB, and if they're looking at GM candidates right now, Browns picking at 2, they're probably going to get a QB. Giants are stuck, which means you're looking at probably trying to fill the quarterback position in free agency just so that you don't have to really spend a pick, trade picks, whatever it is. So the Giants are kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place when it comes to that. Now, Ralph did chime in. He said it was reported late yesterday that there will be coaching changes in Pittsburgh, and Tomlin isn't one. What all the media experts don't understand, there's a thing called the Rooney whistle as far as Tom being fired. It's not happened. Rooney will never abide his own rule. Rooney has to force Tomlin to resign and has a trade clause. That's a big thing. Like, how is that going to actually shape in Pittsburgh to where either either they just part ways or something like that? And actually, this just broke from Adam Schefter. And I don't think the Jets would consider this. Mike McCarthy and Dallas are parting ways. So Dallas is now in the market for a head coach. I don't think that Mike McCarthy would fit the Jets. I know they've gone, I think that McCarthy interviewed the last coaching cycle. I don't think, if you're going to look to bring back Aaron Rodgers, you're not getting Mike McCarthy. But that's up to him. Now, do the Jets put in a call? Maybe. We'll see. But that's, I think, a real interesting name that just came in the market. So if you're just joining and you're listening here, Mike McCarthy is not expected to be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. But it looks like Chicago and New Orleans, I think, would be where McCarthy comes into play. So we'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll hear my conversation with Jake Asman from the Jake Asman Show from ESPN New York. He's a guy that I've met over the last couple of years. Really good guy. And I think you're going to get a lot of insight from Jake. He's really one of the better Jet minds out there in the media. So you want to be sure to check that out. So listen to that, and we'll be right back with that interview after this.
Hey there, IE Sports Radio fans. Be sure to check out our sponsor, Seal the Deal Wax Seals by Cecilia B. You just finished your very own wedding or baby shower invitations and you're looking for that extra special touch? Maybe you just wrote a letter to a relative or a friend and you want to add to their smile when they receive it. Then seal the deal with Cecilia's handmade sealing wax stamps for your invitations, letters, and gifts. You bring the deal, we'll bring the seal. You can find them on Instagram at sealthedeal_wax stamps and on Facebook, Seal the Deal Wax Seals.
For the last 10 years, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. Make sure to follow us at IE Sports Radio on X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube to keep up with the latest in sports and with all of our shows. Also, make sure to check out our daily updated website at iesportsradio.com. At iesportsradio.com, you can see our daily show schedule and check out all of our show pages with personal bios to learn a little bit more about each of our awesome hosts. In addition to our show pages, you can catch the iSports Radio blog, Hall of Fame, Fans of the Month page, and our merchandise shop including t-shirts, tank tops, caps, long sleeves, hoodies, and more. For now over a decade here at IE Sports Radio, we've continued to be by the fans, for the fans, and we thank you all for your support and for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that is sports.
Welcome back here to New York State of Sports and IE Sports Radio, direct feed for all that is sports. And we're talking about the Jets head coach and GM search. They're talking to everybody and anybody. So I had to talk to everybody and anybody. And joining me on the show right now, you can find him on the Jake Asman Show, wherever you get your shows, YouTube, Spotify. You can catch him on ESPN Radio, Mad Dog Radio. He's everywhere talking some Jets. Jake Asman is here. Jake, how are you today?
Ricky, I'm doing well. How are you? Appreciate you having me on.
I'm doing good. So obviously, as we record this, everything's in real time. The Jets are talking to like 15 people, and Aaron Glenn's going to be interviewing as we talk about this today. So before we get into candidates that you like, if you were on the search committee that Mike Tannenbaum and the firm are looking at, what is your ideal Jets coach and your ideal Jets GM? It doesn't have to be a person, but it could be just characteristics or traits that you're looking for.
Yeah, I value experience. I just don't think, given where the Jets are right now, these are jobs for first-timers. If you are going to hire a first-time head coach, then I feel like the general manager needs to be someone that has done it before and vice versa. I just don't believe, given where the Jets are right now, that they should hire a first-time general manager and pair him up with a first-time coach. I recognize that some of the guys with experience, especially at coach, aren't the most exciting names like Arthur Smith or Matt Nagy, who the Jets are going to be speaking to. But to me, I don't want two guys that have never been in the roles you're hiring them for. So I really value experience. I know the Jets seemingly do as well with the amount of candidates with previous coaching or GM experience they're talking to. But to me, if you could get someone who has done the job that you're hiring them to do, I'll take my chances with that over Woody Johnson and company hiring the next great GM or the next great head coach that has never done it before. So I'm really hoping at least one of these two positions, if not both, are guys that have done it at a high level with previous experience.
Is the coach more important than the GM? Because we're seeing around the league that teams are getting rid of coaches left and right, but we're not seeing a lot of GM changes outside of the Jets and I think one other position. we're seeing one get rid of, or the Raiders getting rid of Pierce and keeping Telesco, or the Bears getting rid of Eberflus, keeping Poles. Do you see maybe the coach getting hired before the GM, and is that just an NFL thing?
I think it really depends on who the coach is. Like, I think Mike Vrabel, for example, has made it clear to people that he wants to be aligned with whoever the GM is, and that's where I think maybe there's an opportunity for the Jets to still get him if he doesn't go to New England, because as you brought up, they don't have a GM. So it's like, hey, Mike, we think highly enough of you as a head coach that we want you to have a say in the GM that you're working with. But I feel like he might be the only candidate that they would do something for that for. But I do think, to answer your first question, Ricky, the coach is more important than the general manager, because I think I look at the Jets like this. They have talent. Like, they have good players. They should have won way more than 5 games. They have a lot of Pro Bowl level players. They have a solidified offensive line that's under contract at 4 of its 5 positions going in the next year. They just need direction. They need leadership. They need a real coaching staff that can maximize the talent. So I think every team is different, but when I look at the Jets situation, I truly do believe the leadership, the coach, and really not just the head coach, but the coaching staff, I think that's more important than the GM. But they're both important, but for right now where the Jets are at, I think the head coach is way more important than any general manager.
So in your opinion, how attractive is this Jet coach and GM job compared to the other openings around the league?
It's going to really depend on how you view some of the other openings in terms of, like, what do you want? Like, if you believe in Caleb Williams and think he's going to be great, I'd say that's an attractive job. But I also could say, well, I don't know if I'm in love with Caleb Williams and I got to go play in the NFC North. The GM is questionable, to say the least. Ownership is not great. And all I got to deal with, 3 teams in my own division that all are coming off 11 or more wins, right? I could say, well, I love the New England job because they have Drake May, but what if you don't believe in Drake May? And then you look at the roster and it's not any good. So it really kind of depends to me what you're looking for. I think the Jets job is probably somewhere in the middle of the pack. The owner's reputation will hurt them, but Woody is known to spend big bucks. So can you get by that by just promising, he's not going to step in? He lost faith in the previous regime and he wants to bring in people he trusts here to let them do their job. Like, can you sell a new GM and coach on that? Plus money talks, maybe. And the Jets, as we talked about, they do have some talent here. So all these jobs are open for a reason. Like, I don't think there's one, like, this is clearly the best job. Like, I just think it really depends on what you're looking for. I think the fact that the Jets don't have a GM helps them because you're starting on the same timeline with the head coach that you hire. So it really kind of depends on if you're a coaching or GM candidate, what is it you're looking for? Because you could probably find pros and cons for all 5 of the openings right now.
Well, I think what has to make part of this job attractive, I mean, I know Woody Johnson's reputation doesn't help him, and he got around to this head coach and GM opening way earlier than he maybe should have. But you look at the other team in town and having too much patience or pretending they have patience, but they actually don't. It's like punishing your kid when you don't want to, with John Mara. But I think Woody Johnson, to me, showing that he's interviewing so many people, is actually preaching patience, because you look at maybe Robert Kraft only hiring in town with the Patriots only 2 or 3 guys. Going through this process, I think shows at least some change, you think?
Yeah, 100%. I feel like the one thing the Jets did do that was smart was get a head start on the process. Like, once it became obvious Joe Douglas wasn't going to be here, like, they did the right thing getting rid of him during the bye week. Start your process. I like that Mike Tannenbaum and Rick Spielman are assisting with the candidate list and the interview process. Talk to as many people as possible. You can learn a lot about your organization. Talking to a guy like Josh McCown, maybe he's not your head coach, but maybe if you hired Brian Flores, well, then Josh McCown could be his offensive coordinator he brings with him from Minnesota. So I do like the amount of people they're talking to. Some of the names I'm surprised that they haven't spoken to include, like, John Gruden and Pete Carroll, for example. But for the most part, I like the list. I like the process. I like how they're, getting ahead of it. And I do think, to go back to what we were talking about just before, the fact that they need a GM and coach and they're coming in together, I think that helps the Jets compared to some other teams where, maybe if you're Chicago, you don't want to work with Ryan Poles. If you're Ben Johnson, you don't want to work with a GM that has a suspect resume, and your future's in the hands of that guy. So the fact that both coach and GM would start on the same timeline, I think, helps the Jets when it comes to getting a candidate.
So the name that popped up earlier this week that got an interview that is willing to talk about his interview is Rex Ryan. Are you on board with a reunion, or are you on pause with that?
Yeah, I'm more open to it, I think, than some Jet fans. I just feel like they could do better than Rex. And where Rex lost me was he did an interview on the station I host for, ESPN New York, the other day, and they asked him about his coaching staff. And he basically said he doesn't know his staff yet. Like, I'm like, Rex, you've been out of the league for almost 10 years. That question's going to come up. Like, don't tell me you're going to hire the best staff. Like, you don't know. Like, maybe he's just saying that in the interview and he'll have a better answer when he actually had the interview the other day with the Jets brass. But I just feel like if you're going to hire Rex, you got to be sure that he's really learned a lot over the last decade, that he's going to be able to run a modern offense, that he has a well thought out coaching staff. Because, I love Rex, but the reality is he's been gone for a while. It didn't end great. It didn't work in Buffalo. And the Jets are the only team that's interviewing Rex Ryan for an opening. So you could do worse than Rex. Like, I'd take Rex over like Matt Nagy. I'd take Rex over Arthur Smith. But I still really do prefer Vrabel and Flores clearly as like my top two of the ones that they have spoken to so far.
Yeah, Rex to me is the middle of the pack. You get the PR that he can bring, but at the same time, like you said, he's been out of the league for a while. And I always think with Rex is he actually learns stuff. Like he loves to say things, but does he actually sit back and reflect on anything he says? I think that's, like you said in that interview I listened to as well, it didn't look like sounded he really learned anything.
Yeah, it was just classic like bluster and brash from Rex, which is fine, but I need more of a plan, Rex. Like you're going to be you. He'd fix the defense. I'm confident in that. It would provide like a nice jolt to everyone in the building, but that's going to wear off once the game start and they're not winning. So what's your plan at quarterback? He's flip-flopped on Aaron Rodgers. First he said I'd bring him back, and now he's like, oh, well, it's not going to be a country club atmosphere if I'm running the show. And, it just kind of feels like he's trying to say what he wants to hear, and he doesn't actually have, a coherent, tangible plan to what he would do. But, look, I love the guy. I'm willing to hear him out, but that answer about his coaching staff the other day, that really rubbed me the wrong way.
So the other big issue for any coach or GM is Aaron Rodgers. Woody has said he'll let the new regime decide on that. So you're the new regime. Aaron Rodgers, yes or no in 25?
I would bring him back. Do I think he is personally back with the Jets? I don't. I just think a new regime is going to want to start over. But, tell me where they're finding a better option at quarterback, especially with him being willing to take a pay cut. And if you bring Rodgers back, it means you get Devontae back. So now, if you don't have Rodgers, you have just Garrett Wilson in the receiver room, and then who? Lazard's gone. Malachi Corley can't play. They won't even play him. Xavier Gibson is not any good. So you got to completely revamp your wide receiver room, and you got to tell me what the plan is at quarterback. Is it Tyrod Taylor and Jordan Travis? Is it Tyrod Taylor and you sign Justin Fields? Like, I don't know. I would bring Rodgers back. I think it's going to depend on who the coach is. Like if they did hire Vrabel, I think he'd want Rodgers, but we'll see. I don't know how ultimately the Jets are going to view Rodgers in terms of, like, are they hiring a candidate based on what that candidate had said about what to do with Rodgers? And Woody Johnson said that he'd leave it up to the next regime, which is the right answer. But do we believe him? That's another thing we don't know.
Yeah, and you look at Aaron Rodgers this year, last 7 or 8 games actually looked pretty good. I mean, 28 touchdowns, only 11 interceptions. I think his decline is and getting a full healthy offseason if he does want to play. And you look around the league, like you said, like if Sam Darnold's second option, I don't need to see ghosts anymore. Like watching the game week 18 reminded me of that with Darnold. Like I'm not, and I don't want to pay him $40 million either. There's no really draft quarterbacks out there either. So that was maybe my next question. If not Rodgers, then who? Because even I'm struggling to Kirk Cousins. I don't want to see Kirk Cousins in MetLife. And there's no quarterback I can draft at 7. Otherwise taking a guy in the second, third round, which I'd rather just develop Jordan Travis then.
Yeah, 100%. Look, I like Rodgers. I know he's not perfect. He was not great this year, but I think people got to understand something. How many times did he put the Jets in position to win, and this defense, which was supposed to be the strength of the team, completely collapsed and fell apart? Like, if you put this version of Aaron Rodgers on last year's Jets team, Ricky, you know this, they're a playoff team. They win more than 7 games. They won 7 games in spite of their quarterback situation last year because Greg Zuerlein was incredible. The defense was ferocious. And this year, I mean, the Jets had the lead late against the New England Patriots. They lost that game when Jacoby Brissett stuck it up there, you know what. They lost the Colt game late when Anthony Richardson, who's not any good, stuck it up there, you know what. They lost the Miami game late when Tua, down 8, led them down the field on the defense. Touchdown, 2-point conversion, don't get the ball in overtime, and they lose. Like, there are so many games, plus the games at the beginning of the year, where Zerline's missed kicks directly attributed to them losing 2 or 3 games. So I'm not telling you Rodgers was perfect. He certainly didn't play well in the fourth quarter in critical moments in certain games this year, like the Vikings game I was at in London, for example. But ultimately, he played well enough to be better than a 5-win quarterback. And if you get a real coach, I still believe Aaron Rodgers is good enough to have this team competing for a playoff spot next year, assuming a real coaching staff maximizes the existing talent that's still on both sides of the ball.
So let's take a look. Besides quarterback, what's the biggest need for this team this offseason?
Well, leaving out coach, because that's obvious, coach and GM.
Right.
I think the Jets really have to beef up their interior defensive line. I mean, Joe Douglas destroyed what was once an elite unit. Not even just the interior, like a guy next to Quinn Williams, because it's certainly not Javon Kinlaw. What a stiff that guy is. They need to revamp the entire defensive line room. They need to get back to having guys that are good against the run, having guys that can play sound fundamental football that aren't just about trying to sack chase and put up stats. I mean, how bad was Clemens and Hassan Reddick this year? I mean, this was a strength. They get rid of JFM, Bryce Huff, Quentin Jefferson. They try and bring in guys being like, our system is great for anyone, and it just wasn't true. I mean, you got to get Jermaine Johnson back, which is huge. You have Will McDonald, and then you have Quentin Williams. Outside of that, they need to completely revamp that defensive line room. That, to me, is the biggest thing for the Jets on that side of the ball.
So 2 more before let's get out of here. Who is your dark horse head coach candidate?
Ooh, I'm going to say Josh McCown. Offensive guy. He's has ties to the Jet organization. He's beloved by the ownership group. I know that for a fact. And look, if the Jets hired him, they'd be basically saying, we found the next Kevin O'Connell. We found the next Kyle Shanahan. We found the next Sean McVay. We think we're going to get this guy a year early than when everyone is going to be everyone's going to be talking about him. So I feel like McCown has got a better chance than maybe some realize because of his ties to the Jets, the fact that we've seen success with a lot of former players in the league, like O'Connell, like what we're seeing, of course, with Dan Campbell, just to name a few. I could see Josh McCown being a dark horse candidate for this team.
So mine, I'll give you, I don't think he'll get it because of his age. I would consider Joe Brady. I know he's only 35, but I know Brian Dable supposedly fixed Josh Allen, but Joe Brady fixed Josh Allen. And I think if you're going to go the youth quarterback route, you bring a veteran coach around him. Obviously, his work with LSU, with Burrow. I think that's a guy, if you're looking offensive mind and lack of experience, I could see maybe bringing him in. At least I like that they're picking their brain and maybe finding something on Allen. But I think that would be interesting, taking away in the division, taking away from Josh's strength, especially in a weak division as is.
Yeah, another offensive-minded guy. Look, if they're going to try the first-time head coach thing, I mean, I really would prefer that guy to be on offense. I know people like Aaron Glenn. It just stinks that he's a defensive guy, you know? It just feels like, oh, no, are we hiring Robert Saleh 2.0 again? So that's my concern with, some of the first-time defensive guys. Brady's an intriguing name. I am surprised staying with offensive guys. To my knowledge, they've yet to request Liam Cohen, who's the Bucs offensive coordinator. He'd be another name I'd be intrigued by, but I definitely would be open to Joe Brady if they're going to hire a first-timer.
So when you talk about Aaron Glenn, since he's interviewing as we record this, is it more first time? Because I like the masterclass he put on in Week 18 is kind of like his audition film, and I think being an ex-Jet kind of helps him with the market. I think it's kind of, to me, it's a little bit different from Saleh because I think I know who Aaron Glenn is. Is that change anything? His New York experience kind of trumping the fact he's never coached?
I definitely think his ties to the organization help him. He played for Parcells. He was a really good Jet. He was a scout for the Jets when he first started getting into, coaching or for a front office role when he was still kind of figuring out what it is he wanted to do. So I like his background. It's just, once again, the defensive thing just irks me. I have just a bad feeling about guys on that side of the ball who have never been head coaches. It's not necessarily fair to Glenn because, like, maybe he's the next, Sean McDermott, for example. He's a really good coach. I don't know, but I feel like it is going to help him, his ties to the Jets, and he is a really good candidate. I just personally would prefer someone that has been a head coach before over a first-time defensive-minded coach in Aaron Glenn.
So let's get here on this. What's your pick? Head coach? You want to go GM as well? Who are you picking as the next guy?
My dream scenario would be GM is Thomas Dimitroff, former Falcons GM, who was one of the first candidates they interviewed, and the head coach is Vrabel. Now, do I think Vrabel's going to come to the Jets? I think he's likely going to New England. So I'll say Dimitroff and Brian Flores. Brooklyn guy, had success with Miami. It was only there 3 years. First year, they were supposed to be the worst team in the league, overachieved, won 5 games. Second year, 10 wins. Last year, 9 wins. He's probably going to end up being right about Tua not being a true franchise quarterback. Now he's got to figure out, how to have a better relationship with his next young quarterback. But I think he's learned a lot. He had a year under Tomlin after he left Miami. Now 2 years with Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings. I like Brian Flores. I think he deserves another opportunity. So if they got him, I'd be in. Woody, get me Dimitroff, get me Flores. Let's get professionals who have done the jobs you're hiring them to do before, so they're not learning on the job as this franchise has not made the playoffs in 14 years and counting. So I really hope at least one of the two, if not both, are guys that have previous experience in the roles you're hiring them for.
And I think bringing an experienced coach like Flores, if Rodgers wants to come back, the second-time head coach is going to want to make sure he's around long enough to not get fired. I mean, that would kind of be the leaning path to that, I would think.
I think so, too. I think if it's a first-time coach, they might not want Rodgers. I think if it's Vrabel or Flores, I think they would want Aaron Rodgers. I mean, people act like, oh, it's been decided. There's no way he's coming back. It's like, why? Like, how many quarterbacks out there are going to throw 28 touchdowns that you could bring in next year? Not many, if any.
So, Jake, you're busy, guys. So before I let you get out of here, tell listeners how they can follow all of your work and anything you'd like to plug.
You put it up on the screen. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Jake Asman. I'm on YouTube every day. I'm on the radio, typically on ESPN New York every Saturday or Sunday, or if I'm filling in, the schedule could be different. But between radio and YouTube, it's all on at Jake Asman where you can find me.
It's a busy guy talking Jets. Great sound bites on social media. Be sure to check him out. Jake, thanks again for hopping on, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks for having me, Ricky. Really appreciate it.
And we'll be right back with more New York State of Sports after this.
Hockey fans, I'm Adam Kernick.
And I'm Zach Puplis.
Together, we are the newest version of Hockey Talk on IE Sports Radio, The Neutral Zone.
Zone.
We love hockey, but we also know it's not everyone's first sport. So we want to make this show as much for new fans as for the diehards.
Whether you can name all the Swedes on the 08 Red Wings Stanley Cup team, or if you can't tell if Varlamov is a goalie or the latest trendy vodka, we're here to help. With facts, figures, and outrageous fans, we bring you all the hard-hitting hockey news you can handle, while still keeping it fun and on the rails. Well, mostly.
So tune in every week as we go around the hockey world, from college to Canada, the minors and the majors, and everywhere in between.
So bring your cellies.
And your one-timers.
You wicked wristas.
And be sure to protect your five-hole.
Catch the Neutral Zone every week on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
We promise not to pick on the Arizona Coyotes every episode.
Hey sports fans, are you in the market for Florida sports or just keeping up with the latest in the Panhandle? Palm Tree Sports is a dedicated audio hub to all things sports in the Sunshine State. We cover current events, big news, heavily favored opinions all across the NFL, NBA, MLB, and so much more. So come check us out every Saturday evening at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For a down south education on Florida sports and athletics, it's hosted by yours truly, Corey Pujols, and is powered by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
And a special thanks again to Jake Asman for hopping on the show. One of my goals for 2025 for the show is to get you some more guests, get you some more local experts on some of these teams to get their opinions and their insight. So Jake was very fortunate to get Jake on the show. Hoping to get a couple more over the next couple of months, and we'll see where it goes. And we'll also in this segment talk about a milestone for this show, not just the 1 year anniversary next week, but something cool we got to do yesterday that I think you're going to have a lot of fun hearing about. So let's talk about the Knicks. And it was a real interesting week for the Knicks, and it kind of just puts in perspective where they are as a team. Now, they did lose to Orlando on Monday. That was last week. That was a weird game. Magic were better. Knicks just couldn't hit a shot. Then they went out and blew out Toronto as they should. So we're really going to ignore those two games. It was Friday night against Oklahoma City that really kind of just showed where the Knicks were, and not in a good way. That's a game you just lost them the week before. Thunder are coming in after losing to Cleveland, having that 15-game win streak snapped. Chance to get some revenge. Probably the biggest game in the Garden all year. And they laid a huge egg, losing 126-101. They weren't competitive. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has 39 points in that game. The Knicks as a team shoot just 4 for 31 from three. They couldn't hit anything. They got out-rebounded in Isaiah Hartenstein's return to the Garden. They turned it over 12 times. Not a good performance at all. And it's one that left a lot of bad feelings amongst Knicks fans. Okay, is this team what is this team exactly? Now, they go out there yesterday. Jalen Brunson gets 23 points in the first quarter against Giannis lower in the Bucks. Brunson leaves the game for a bit with a shoulder stinger, comes back. And the Knicks cruise 140-106 to get some separation because the Bucks are right now in that sixth position. The Knicks are third. It's about a 4-game lead on the Bucks. So they feel pretty good there. But here's the problem right now with the Knicks. I don't think they're bad. I don't think they're great. And that's, I think, the thing here with the Knicks. You look at them halfway through the year, because we're at that halfway point. The 26-14. I think any Knicks fan would sign up for that and how good they've been. They're most likely going to be in that, as I said last week, that they were from 2 to about 5 or 6. I don't think they're playing danger. They're 4.5 ahead of the Heat for that right now, and the Bucks. Bucks are tied with the Heat for 6. But they aren't beating the top teams. And what I mean by that, they didn't beat the Celtics. They've struggled to beat Cleveland. Everybody struggled to beat Cleveland. They're 33-5. They get swept by Oklahoma City. So you look at being 0-5 against those 3 teams. Now, yes, 3 teams is not a fair sample size, but that's the only teams that are really ahead of them right now in the standings. That's the only things we can really use as litmus tests, and that's why Friday was so disappointing. And that they didn't put up, even if the Knicks lost like a game at the buzzer or it was a 2-possession game late or something like that, you probably could really look at it a little bit differently. It just shows you they still need more help, and we mentioned that the last couple of weeks, how much help they do need. They maybe could get another defender in here that would be helpful, some shooting. There's still some pieces they have to fit. Because the problem you look at from the Knicks standpoint is they still have the toughest schedule to go in the NBA. They've beaten up all the also-rans, and that's what they should do. They're like 13-1 against teams under 5. Like they're crushing the teams they got to crush. That's a good thing. But you look at a couple of teams they have, like the rest of this month, they have Minnesota next Friday. They have Denver coming up, Memphis in January. And then you look at their February, they get the Celtics twice. They get Memphis again. They have Cleveland on the road after the All-Star break. Rockets were 25-12. They're second in the West right now. They still have another game with Boston somewhere along the line. They have another game with Boston and Cleveland in April. So they still have a lot of games left with those top teams, or maybe the second half of the year. They make kind of a statement when they add pieces to the trade deadline, things will look different. And again, that's not saying the Knicks can't win a championship. It's just right now they're not there yet. But that's why we play the games. That's why there's 41 games left in the year, or 42, really. Be 41 after tonight when they play the Pistons. Pistons beat the Knicks at the Garden earlier this year. Knicks also had some guys resting in that game. It is the second night of a back-to-back, so you never, or with injuries, so you never know what might happen with that. They have Detroit this week. Detroit tonight. They have the Sixers on Wednesday, who aren't very good. The game's in Philly, 7 o'clock on ESPN. And then Minnesota on Friday at home. So Randall and DiVincenzo's return to Madison Square Garden. That should be a good scene for them. And then they will play Atlanta on Monday. That's the Martin Luther King afternoon game that we'll preview about a couple hours before we hop on. Speaking of the local team in town, the Brooklyn Nets, they continue to lose. And I think every Nets fan or most Nets fans expect that. As they can't catch up to the Raptors or the Pelicans and the Wizards in how bad those teams are, but they're going to help their lottery chances. And it's not saying they're actively tanking. It's not. The front office has kind of just put that out in the rearview mirror. Like you look at the game last night, they play Utah. Utah's not very good. They've got 3 wins less than they do. And the Jazz win on a late layup by Isaiah Collier in overtime, 112-111. Nets have had a lot of injuries too. You have to give them, like, those players are fighting very hard, but when you don't have Cam Johnson on the floor right now, he's got a right ankle sprain. D'Angelo Russell's not out there. Ben Simmons had 14 and 9 last night, 9 assists, so a very good performance from him on 7 of 11 shooting. But the guy that stood out for the Nets, Zaire Williams had 19, but you look at we've seen Tyrese Martin come up and make an impact from the G League. Toussaint F. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. 6'8" from Princeton. He had a really good game last night against Utah. He was getting the ball late down the stretch. He played 24 minutes, 22 points, 5 rebounds. He had 10 against the Nuggets on Friday, game they lost 124-105, and 13 against the Pistons on Wednesday. So this is a player averaging 11 points per game. He's doing a decent job. And when you watch the Nets, you just want to see these guys put up a fight. Because you want to see, okay, who's going to be on this round out this roster next year when you look at after. And Mark Stein even said it, that he doesn't think Brooklyn is going to make that big splash this offseason. We'll see if they do. Claxton had a double-double last night. But that's where the Nets are. The last missing piece in terms of trading is going to be what they do with Cam Johnson between now and the trade deadline. So we'll see what happens there. Nets this week are at Portland on Tuesday, at the Clippers on Wednesday, at the Lakers on Friday, and then at the Thunder on Sunday. So West Coast trips galore for the Nets. That started with the Denver loss. Their last win was against the Bucks on January 2nd. So we'll see if they can pick up at least another win or two on this West Coast trip. But considering how it started, it doesn't look pretty. But Portland's a winnable game for them. We'll see if they actually pull it off. Now let's talk some hockey. Big fan of talking about some hockey. And Rangers are providing a little bit of hope. Now, that might be a bad thing because you might be thinking, hey, the Rangers season has been a wash. They've underachieved. They've had injuries. Phil Petel's been injured over the last couple of weeks, but it sounds like he's getting on the right track. But a really strong week for the Rangers that could have been elite had one thing happen. Had they not blown a 3-goal lead in the first period against Dallas, they would have picked up 3 pretty good wins this week. They get a point in that 5-4 overtime loss to Dallas last week, but that's one they would want back. But they beat the Devils for the first time last Thursday. Sam Carrick with an overtime goal to win 3-2, and then a really strong performance against Vegas. Going on the road, getting a 2-1 win, 29 saves from Igor. Adam Enstrom gets the goal in the third period off the shot from Brzezinski. Trocheck gets a goal in the second period. And you look where the Rangers stand right now in terms of a playoff spot. They're right there as much as everybody else in the East is. They're 4 points behind Columbus for a playoff spot with the game in hand. So they still have one extra game they have to play. But the East in terms of those last 2 playoff spots is wide open. So while the Rangers maybe can't catch Carolina for that third spot in the Metro, definitely I don't think they get the Devils. That's why I don't make a big deal when the Devils struggle, because I just think the Rangers are at a much better, like, the Devils are going to be fine. As long as they don't collapse, they're going to be okay. But the Rangers at least starting to play better. They've won 3 of their last 4. We'll see if they keep that going on this West Coast trip. They're at Colorado tomorrow. That's a really tough game. That's a 9 o'clock first 9 o'clock puck drop. They're at Utah on Thursday, a team that's right about their level. And then home to Columbus on Saturday. That's a big game for the Rangers because they're chasing Columbus for one of those wild card spots. So still a chance to gain some ground, because you look at after this Colorado game, they only have 3 more games this month against teams with more than 50 points. It's Colorado twice, and a game with Carolina at home at the end of the year, or the end of January. So a chance to really gain some ground against teams that are right around where the Rangers are, which is a good sign for them for sure. Going around at least really quickly, we're going to highlight some things with the Devils. Devils had a really good win against the Lightning in overtime on Saturday. They had a little bit of a break after beating the Kraken on Monday. Stefan Noesen, a power play going overtime, his 17th of the year. Markstrom had 23 saves. Jack Hughes, another goal in this one. So the Devils get a 3-2 win with the Kraken. Markstrom had some big saves last week and then tapped it off with the win against the Lightning. Big test for the Devils tomorrow. They're against Carolina. Not against Carolina. That's the football team. Against Florida Panthers on Tuesday. That's a Disney Plus, ESPN Plus exclusive. They're at the Maple Leafs on Thursday, and then home to the Flyers Saturday, and home to Ottawa on Sunday. So good test coming up for the Devils. Now, let's talk about the Islanders. And the Islanders, I think, have been another team, kind of like the Rangers, trying to find their fitting. And they actually, I think, had a really good West Coast trip. And they're starting to play better. Remember we talked about last week that Patrick Waugh was like, I think we're playing better, but I'm not really sure to just how to describe it. They kind of ripped him for that a little bit. But the Islanders have kind of put themselves back in the conversation as well. They are around, I would say, 5 points out of a playoff spot right now, but they've actually are starting to play better hockey. They picked up the win over the Bruins in overtime last week. They go out to Vegas and they win 4-0. And it was a highlight. Ilya Sorokin had 30 saves, another shutout for him. He has done a really good job. But the interesting fun fact, and credit my guy Ralph Calise for bringing this up, Anders Lee played in his 800th game on Thursday. Now, the Islanders have 4 players on their team that have played at least 800 games with the Islanders. That's Lee, Brock Nelson, Casey Cizikas, and Matt Martin. And he told me to dig up some homework. The last time it was done was 1986. And that was so Eric Hornick of MSG does a good job as their stats guy. It was Dennis Potvin, Clark Gillis, Brian Trottier, and Bob Bourne had that happen. And it was a 9-7 game in the Meadowlands in 1986. Now, the question that Ralph had asked me about that game, and I can pull it up real quick just to see when that was the case, is did any of those players score in that game like Anders Lee did? So we're going to pull that up real quick, which is real interesting. It doesn't look like. So to answer Ralph's question, no. So in a game that was 9-7, none of those guys scored. That's an interesting one. But the Islanders get a win there. That was, I think, a real impressive one. So good job by the locals out in Vegas getting wins. And then they go to play the Utah Hockey Club Saturday. And they get a comeback win in the third. Brock Nelson ties it, and then Matt Barzal wins it with under a minute and a half to go. But that wasn't really the story for the Islanders. I want to give some love to Marcus Hogberg. He filled in. Sorokin getting the night off. 21 saves on 22 shots. And this is a player that hadn't played in a game in the NHL since he played with Ottawa in the 2021 season. So the 30-year-old from Sweden gets a really good win. So congratulations to him. And what's really good for the Islanders now is they're going to be home a lot. They're actually home for the next 7 games. They have 1 road game to end January, but the rest of the month they're playing at UBS. So if you want to gain ground, this is the time to do it. They will be against the Senators on Tuesday, against the Flyers on Thursday, and against the Sharks on Saturday. So a lot of winnable games here for the Islanders to try to make up some ground. Now, before we take our final commercial break, because I want to kind of split this up a little bit better. Now, yours truly got to do a really fun thing yesterday, and you'll read more about it. I have a blog post coming up hopefully tomorrow on this, maybe Wednesday. Our show, and I want to thank the New York Sirens for allowing us to be part of the press yesterday. That was a lot of fun. First time ever going to a PWHL game. If you haven't known, it's Professional Women's Hockey League's out of the Prudential Center. They're a 6-team league. Sirens were taking on the Toronto Scepters. It was a really interesting game. The Sirens ended up winning 1-0 in overtime. Jessie Eldridge gets her third of the year and a goal that looked like she was offsides. It's not challengeable in the PWHL, but she wins it with about a minute and a half to go in OT in a 3-on-3. And what was really impressive to me watching this game, and the focus of my piece is going to be mostly on the goalie, Corinne Schroeder. Corinne Schroeder has now had back-to-back shutouts in the game she started. Now the Sirens have, as their coach was saying yesterday, and we met with him after the game, they have 3 goaltenders they tend to rotate through. But Schroeder is one that right now has really been elite. She was nominated for goaltender of the year last year, and she's really stepped up her game. Her goals against average is under 2 in the games she's played this year. And when you look at this game, it was a tale of 2 periods. The Sirens outshot Toronto 10-3 in the first. Then Toronto came right back and outshot them 17-3 in the second. And to face that many shots after not seeing any shots in the first and to still keep this game scoreless as she did, really impressive performance. And there were some fantastic saves that she made. The Scepters did miss some point-blank shots, I thought, but at the same time, a very impressive performance by Corinne. And she has been, I think right now, one of the better goaltenders in the league. But if you get a chance, go check out one of these games. It's a lot of fun. Good atmosphere, good family-friendly atmosphere. It was a pretty good crowd for a noon game on a Sunday. So, again, thank you to the New York Sirens. And it shows, hey, look where we're going, where the show has now been a part of the media. That's, I think, a really good experience for this show in particular. So thank you to the Sirens for providing us with that awesome insight yesterday, the chance to have that awesome insight for you guys. Let's take one more break, one more quick one. We'll talk St. John's. We'll talk Yankees and Mets, what's left for them over the final month, and so much more. Coming up next, we wrap up episode 73 of New York State of Sports. We'll take one more quick timeout and come back after this.
Sports fans, do you like teams that are tough, cities that are tougher, and fan bases that are passionate about their teams? How about teams that are historic and stadiums that are iconic? Then you belong in Chicago, and you need to check out Chi-Town Weekly. Join me, Adam Kernan, every week as we keep up with all things Chicago sports. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, White Sox. We'll cover them all, plus more. The Windy City is always buzzing, and we'll keep you up on all the big games and major stories. So tune in to Chi-Town Weekly every week right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hello, everyone. My name is Daryl Kinsey Jr., and I'm welcoming you to take another lap with the fastest show on IE Sports Radio. Yes, this is the Extra Mile with me and my co-hosts Christopher Lehman and Michael Ward. We talk everything racing from NASCAR to IndyCar to Formula One to limited hydroplanes, endurance racing, the NHRA, and more. So come join us for an hour of great racing talk and a lot of fun as well on the Extra Mile, Thursdays at 8 p.m. only on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
One more quick segment here on New York State Sports, IE Sports Radio, direct feed for all the sports. Extra Mile is, I believe, returning this week. So be sure to check out some auto racing content that's back for the new year. So check that out. Talk some college basketball. And Saturday night was, I think, everything that St. John's fans, St. John's alum like myself have wanted for a long time. A game at the Garden, a game with expectations of winning, a game that the Garden fills up to 18,000 for a late night game against a rival in Villanova. And yes, St. John's won 80-68. It's a 12-point win. It was a dramatic second half. Devion Smith was great in the first half, ends up hurting his shoulder. Now, fortunately, it sounds like from what his comments to the media were today, that it's just a sore shoulder. There's a shoulder sprain. I'm sure he'll try to play tomorrow when St. John's takes on Georgetown. That's a game on Peacock at the Garden. I would think you wouldn't play him, and you would just say, you know what, wait till Saturday when they play Seton Hall. But Smith wasn't a spark. You saw the team kind of go through a lull early in the second half when he was not out there. He did try to play again, but then couldn't really do it. And I think it was not a surprise to anybody that he couldn't. But RJ Lewis was fantastic. 30 points, 10 rebounds. First guy to have 30 points for St. John's since Julian Champagny a couple of years ago. You had Simeon Wilcher hitting clutch shots down the stretch. He had, even though he didn't make a three, he was at least making some key layups and some mid-range shots when they needed them. You saw what Kadara Richmond was able to do, getting some big three-point plays, doing what he does. And you look at a St. John's team that dominated the glass, 44-28 against a Villanova team that has one of the better scorers in the country in Eric Dixon, and they held him to 18 points on just 6 of 19. Aaron Scott did a really good job defensively with his length and making that kind of impact. And why this win is so significant. St. John's is 5-1 in Big East play through 6 games. They have not been 5-1 in the Big East in 25 years. And to me, that speaks to the impact that Rick Pitino has had in just his second year. The expectations are starting to change and change for the better. You're seeing the spark back with St. John's. You're seeing people want to go watch these games. You're seeing an expectation and a standard being set. They didn't make a tournament last year, but they were a really fun team toward the down the stretch. But this is their most talented team. And it's a team with grit, a team with defense, one of the better defensive teams in the country. And again, they've had 3 losses. The 3 losses are by 5 points combined. That's the second shortest margin of defeat in the country behind Iowa State, who has 1 loss. Like, that's how talented this is. And they can just make any 3-point shots. Like, even they get to like 25, 30% as a team, they're going to be elite because they're going to be in every game. The Big East is wide open for them to win. And this is a favorable point in the schedule for them. Like, we'll see in the next hour or so if they do end up being ranked again for the second time this year. But they've clearly set the standard. That's going to be a tough game against Georgetown. Georgetown, Ed Cooley's done a good job in his second year. He's 12-4. Should bring that old rivalry spark back with both these teams actually good. I think Georgetown is not great, but they're good. And St. John's isn't great, but they're in the upper echelon of the Big East. I mean, you look at the Big East right now, the only 3 teams with 5 wins are Marquette, St. John's, and Connecticut. St. John's doesn't play Marquette and Connecticut until February. That's, I think, we're going to find out. Is this St. John's team elite and it can really make a run, or is this a team that's going to maybe win a game or 2 in the tournament, which isn't bad either. If they win a game or 2 like that. We haven't seen that in a while. As John Rothstein said, who's on the sideline for that, this is the best team St. John's has had in a decade since Steve Lavin's last year when they made the tournament. I think they were also Lavin's. Remember, I was a student. I think for 2 of those years, a student for Lavin's first year when they maybe if DJ Kenny doesn't get hurt, they make a deep run in the tournament and they're not a 6 seed having to play out west against Gonzaga, who basically had a home game in Salt Lake City, but. Chance for St. John's, I think, to really do some good things. So Georgetown Saturday, Seton Hall, or Tuesday, Seton Hall on Saturday. That's a winnable game at the Prudential Center. But we've seen Seton Hall pull upsets before. Seton Hall's actually scored more points lately. They had an overtime win over DePaul on Wednesday, and then they lost 91-85 to Providence on Saturday. The Pirates have Butler at Hinkle on Wednesday before that matchup with the Johnnies. Rutgers, meanwhile, their season's starting to slip. Starting to slip in the wrong direction, and they are in danger of maybe missing the Big Ten tournament if they can't right this ship either. Remember, not every team in this expanded Big Ten makes the NCAA, makes the Big Ten tournament. Rutgers lost to Wisconsin 75-63 last Monday. They get blown out by Purdue on Thursday 68-50. Both games, by the way, were at the rack. Ace Bailey was 5 of 15 shooting. He had 17 points. Rutgers was 32% as a team shooting. Dylan Harper, who still isn't quite right yet, he had 6 points, just 2 of 9. And the only way they're really going to be in these games is if Bailey and Harper play to their elite potential, because their supporting cast right now isn't there. So Rutgers is 8-8 overall, and the schedule doesn't get easier for them. They have UCLA tonight at home, and the Bruins are sliding. Mick Cronin, I think, knows how big he needs this game. Mick Cronin, from his time with Cincy, has coached in New Jersey before. UCLA is favored by 3.5. Then they are at Nebraska on Thursday. It's a 9 o'clock tip on FS1. Fred Hoiberg's club, 12-4 on the year. Then they will have at Penn State next Monday. We'll preview Rutgers' game a week from Saturday. They will be at the Garden to play Michigan State. There also is a tournament at Prudential Center next week. It's a women's tournament. We'll preview that, I think, more on the show next Monday. So there is some cool things going on locally. In terms of Syracuse, let's try to see what the Cuse have been up to. Syracuse, in their last game, they took on Boston College. They got a road win, 79-71, 26 points for J.J. Starling, 20 of those coming in the second half. Puts the Cuse at 8-8, and they've actually won their last couple. They beat Georgia Tech on Tuesday, 62-55. Cuse will take on a Louisville team that's very improved under Pat Kelsey. That's Tuesday night at the Carrier Dome. And then they will play Notre Dame Saturday at 4 Eastern at the Carrier Dome. Big Syracuse news, by the way, in terms of football. Kyle McCord deciding to go to the NFL draft. Now, we mentioned this a couple weeks ago. They do have a transfer coming in from LSU. And Ricky Collins, I think, is going to be a big factor at quarterback. But McCord had one of the better seasons in college football, not just the ACC. And I think he's a guy that you look at a team that, again, with the quarterback class not being that strong, they bring him in, maybe that he's a day 2, day 3 kind of pick. So I think you can find value with Kyle McCord. Maybe one of the local teams takes him. But it was a good year for him, and good year to kind of reestablish himself after a rough time at Ohio State. Really quickly, before we go into the baseball and wrap up the show, want to give some love locally to the Rod Strickland, the Long Island University Sharks. They were really bad last year. They're actually 4-0 in the Northeast Conference right now. One of the favorites to maybe get a automatic bid if they win their conference tournament. This is a team that was absolutely dreadful a season ago, and they have come back and rewritten the ship completely. So props to a former NBA point guard in Rod Strickland for getting it done. And then other local note, NYCFC deciding to bring back Maxi Morales. That's a big part of their team for Pascal Jansen. That's a big thing for him as the head coach. Now, real quick at the baseball, again, still quiet on the hot stove with, remember, 2 days after the Super Bowl is pitchers and catchers. So that it's coming fast and furious. We'll have Hall of Fame announcements a week from tomorrow. We'll preview that next week with some of the Yankees and Mets that are on the ballot. But they wait word on the international free agent Roki Sasaki. Now, he's met with the Blue Jays. He's met with some of these teams. It doesn't sound – I still think Sasaki's going to either Dodgers or Padres, but his market – the earliest he can sign is Wednesday. So these teams will get word on that, and they can only use their international pool money. So we'll see what happens with that. Yankees, according to Ken Rosenthal, have been looking more at infield help, trying to clear money, maybe the Stroman money, something like that, try to get infield because they're trying to stay under that Steve Cohen tax. But the interesting thing is going to be the bullpen. I think the bullpen market's going to start to pick up. Jeff Hoffman signed with the Blue Jays this week, 3 years, $33 million after failing physicals from Baltimore. And then we just found out today also Atlanta. But you have great names that are out there. Carlos Estevez. Of course, everyone's going to talk about Tanner Scott. Mets met with him last week. Pete Alonso, of course, is still out there for the Mets. There was reports from Jim Duquette that it was like a 3-year deal with opt-outs, no terms on financials, but that's where Pete's market is. And I think it's just a game of chicken between the Mets and Pete Alonso. I can't see how he goes anywhere else. But we will see what happens with that. So that's really where these teams are. And the Yankees could use some bullpen help. In addition to Devin Williams being the closer and with Luke Weaver, maybe Tommy Kahnle comes back. But that's really I think the big moves for the Yankees are mostly done. I think they're going to look just to get one more infielder and maybe a bullpen piece or two. And the Mets, I think, if they do re-sign Pete Alonso, which I still think they will, their big move is going to be more bullpen related and pitching related. I don't think they're going to do much more. I know rumors about Santander. I don't see where he fits in the grand scheme of things. By the way, it just came out, the AP poll for basketball. St. John's is not ranked, but they're 26th. They're the team with the most votes that isn't ranked. So if they win 2 games this week, if they beat Georgetown, they beat Seton Hall, they'll be back in the top 25 for the second time this year. So it's been a fun show, a long show. Thank you all for tuning in with me this week, episode 73. Next week is our 1-year anniversary show. We'll have some fun there. I'll preview the Hall of Fame voting, latest on the Jets coach GM search, Knicks update, Rangers update, St. John's update, Devils up. We're going to get into all that stuff. Special thanks again to Jake Asman from the Jake Asman Show for coming on and talking to the Jets. Special thanks to the New York Sirens for having us in the building yesterday at the Prudential Center. Again, check out my recap of my experience on the IE Sports Radio blog, which you can find at iesportsradio.com. It'll be out either tomorrow, Tuesday, if you're listening to this not live today, or Wednesday. So you're going to check that out over this week. Look, it's going to be fun. I mean, it's been a good NFL playoff so far. I think, again, the Commanders are a reminder of what you can be if you can get the pieces right for both these football teams. For the Jets, it's a reminder. For the Giants, it's what could have been. Watching a team that was picking higher than you last year in the divisional round, and you're sitting back with the hardest schedule next year and trying to figure out what the heck your regime looks like. We're going to see. But this is a good time of year. Football playoffs, Super Bowl in about a month, and we'll get right to baseball. And college basketball, again, the tournament's only 2 months away. So it's really the time where things really get serious with college basketball and this show over here. So thanks again for tuning in here to New York State Sports. For all of us here at IE Sports Radio, I'm Ricky K saying enjoy the rest of your week. It's actually nice out in New York State, 40 degrees. It feels like 60. So if you're in the local area, enjoy the weather. Enjoy the great amount of shows we have coming up on the network today and throughout the course of this week. Got some new shows we've aired. Make sure to check those out. And all of us at the network, I'm Ricky K saying have a great week. Stay back here at the same time, noon Eastern, next week.